You're listening to Murder Not Murdering with Erin,
And Autumn,
a true crime podcast about murder and murdering.
but we are not murderers.
All right, everybody, we're back at Murder Not Murdering with Erin and me. It's just me this week. Unfortunately, Autumn couldn't make it to this recording, so you have me. But don't worry, I have a wild, infamous case to do for you today. I just wanted to say thank you for listening to our podcast. It really means a lot to both of us. And, with everything going on in the world right now, specifically in the United States, it's pretty heavy times for everyone. We've seen some pretty awful murders right on television, and that's really difficult to process. I want to make sure that I'm letting our listeners know that we hope you're taking care of yourselves and you're checking on your friends and you're making sure that you're doing okay during this really tough time. What's happening is awful and horrific and shouldn't be happening. I think we all can't deny what our eyes see, and it's just terrible. So I hope you're taking care of yourselves. I know sometimes listening to this podcast can be a form of self care. Make sure you're taking time between resisting and protesting. All of that can get to be a lot and it gets exhausting. But that's what they want you to do, is to feel exhausted so that you don't have the energy to fight or you become numb to the things that you're seeing. So make sure to take care of yourselves and check on your friends. Like I said, it's super important right now. I'm going to jump into my case fairly quickly here. I hope that you've been enjoying the last couple episodes. We've had some poisonings, we've had some missing persons, some crazy cases. So do check those out. Listen to our archives. We have a ton of episodes. I think we're nearing 100 episodes now. So there's plenty to go back and check through and make sure that you've listened to all of our cases. We do spend a lot of time researching and making sure that we have all the facts correct. That's super important, especially when you are talking about true crime, where most of it is based in facts. So check those out. And again, like I said, we so appreciate everyone that listens, and we appreciate when you tell your friends about our podcast. I've said before, we are just two ladies out here researching, writing, spending time picking and choosing cases that we hope that you will find interesting as we find it interesting. So thank you again for listening and telling your friends. I've got a pretty crazy, infamous case. I know I'm known for doing these cases that people don't really know, but this one is a biggie. And it has some pretty crazy stuff in it, um, which I'm going to get into, I promise. And it does deal with someone who was photographed as they were dying. So do prepare that that is part of this case. And that's partly why it's so infamous. And you're going to find out. You're going to find out right now. If you're ready, I'm ready. And since no one can answer me back, you sound like you're ready. This case is called Ruthless, Double Indemnity, the Snyder and Gray Murder. There's a photograph that should not exist. It was taken in secret. It was taken illegally. And once it was printed, it could never be taken back. A woman is strapped to a heavy oak chair. Her head has been shaved in rough patches, where the clippers caught the scalp unevenly. Her arms are pinned down by thick leather straps, buckled tight across her chest. Her stockings are rolled carefully to the knee, modesty preserved even now. Her shoes are gone. Her body is frozen, not in fear, not in movement, but in the instant after the electricity hits. Her mouth is slightly open, her hands are clenched. Her face is already gone. Above the photograph, the headline read a single word: dead. Tonight, we are talking about the Ruth Snyder and Judd Gray murder. Queens Village, New York, 2227 93rd Street. A tidy house on a tidy block. White siding, a small yard. Curtains always drawn at the same hour every night. This is not a place people expected to see violence. Inside lives a couple, Albert and Ruth, and their daughter Lorraine. Albert Snyder is 44 years old. He works as a magazine art editor for, and forgive my 12-year-old boy that lives inside my body, Motorboating Magazine. I can't help. I want to laugh. I can't help myself. Anyway, some claim that Ruth's disdain for her husband apparently began when he insisted on hanging a portrait of his late fiancée Jessie on the wall of their first home and had named his first boat after her. She had died 10 years earlier, and Albert described her to his wife as the finest woman I have ever met. I think that would be hard for anyone to hear from their significant other. Ruth Brown Snyder. Ruth is described in the papers as neat, as composed, as unremarkable. And that might be the most dangerous thing about her. She isn't trapped. She isn't desperate. She's bored. Bored with her marriage, bored with her domestic routine, bored with being invisible. And she starts growing tired of Albert. She begins to insure Albert's life. Once, then again, then again. Each policy bigger than the last. Ruth persuaded Albert to purchase insurance, and with the assistance of an insurance agent who subsequently was fired and sent to prison for forgery, signed, that's in quotations, a $48,000 life insurance policy with a double indemnity clause, which means they pay extra if an unexpected act of violence killed the victim. I think you can see the wheels turning. By 1927, Albert Snyder was worth more dead than alive. Then Ruth meets Henry Judd Gray, a corset salesman. Judd is not impressive. He is thin. He's described as unattractive and plain, soft-spoken, also married, and he also works as an art editor like Albert, but less successful. He meets Ruth at work, and something clicks, not passion, but recognition. Ruth sees a man who wants to be led. Judd sees a woman who makes him feel important, and they begin a torrid affair. Also, some details of their affair are that they had a little bit of a mommy-son situation. He would call her mommy a lot. In a lot of the letters that they wrote, in a lot of the conversations that were recorded in court transcripts as well. But now they begin to write letters. Ruth wrote to Judd, "You are the only one who understands how dead I feel inside. Every day is pretending. Every night is lying next to a stranger." Judd writes to Ruth, "I would do anything to be with you, anything. I cannot imagine my life without you now." The letters become darker, practical, transactional. Ruth said, "Sometimes I think the only way out is through. I don't see another door." Ruth has tried to kill Albert before. To be precise, Ruth had made at least 7 attempts to kill Albert. Yikes. She tampers with gas. She poisons his food. She waits. Nothing works. Albert survives every attempt. Each failure hardens her. By the time Judd agrees to help, the plan is no longer hypothetical. It's scheduled. And Judd very reluctantly agreed to do this. But Mommy persisted. Mommy pushed. And he listened to her. On March 20th, 1927, Albert comes home. He eats dinner. He goes to bed. Ruth drugs him. When he is unconscious, Judd enters the house, What follows is chaotic. Albert is beaten with a sash weight. That is a weight that is used for windows to open and close. The weight weighs about 5 pounds. Then he is strangled with a picture wire. And chloroform is forced into his lungs. The violence is clumsy. It's panicked. It's very excessive. This is not a clean murder. Afterward, Ruth stages the scene. She has Judd tie her up. She scatters drawers. She screams about intruders. Her 9-year-old daughter, Lorraine, runs for help. When the police arrived, Ruth tells them 2 large Italian men attacked her husband and knocked her out. But she doesn't have any bruises, no wounds. And she says they've been robbed. A New York Daily News headline read, "Wife says burglars slew husband, police doubt story." During the investigation in the home, the police noticed that the blood had soaked through the sheets in the bed. They look under the mattress, and there they find all the jewelry, the wallet, everything she said was stolen, was found. They noticed there was also a lack of forced entry. When Ruth was questioned about this, she immediately said Judd had committed the murder, and they staged it all. So they arrest Judd Gray. He confesses almost immediately. He tells police that he did hit Albert over the head with the sash weight, but he was still alive. He yelled to Ruth for help. Then she grabbed the 5-pound weight and repeatedly hit Albert over the head, and Judd choked him with the picture wire until the deed was done. And they put chloroform rags down his throat. I guess if he survived 7 times of attempted murder at this point, you had to be sure. When confronted with this, Ruth changes her story. She says, "I told them what he said. I was frightened. I only repeated what he told me." She's trying to blame all of this on Judd. However, we know she kind of masterminded the whole thing. The detectives are unmoved. At the time, journalist Damon Runyon called it the dumbbell murder because of the ineptness of the murderers and their attempt to cover it up. The press went completely wild with the story. This was the height of yellow journalism, and the people were hungry. Ruth became the story's femme fatale. Tabloids described her as a synthetic blonde murderess and a vampire wife, and most unusually, Ruthless Ruth, the Viking ice matron of Queen's Village. That one's a bit of a stretch. Judd Gray also spoke to the press frequently, painting himself as the victim. Before Ruth and Gray's trial even began, he described his affair with Ruth to the Daily News like this: "She would place her face an inch from mine and look deeply into my eyes until I was hers completely. While she hypnotized my mind with her eyes, she would gain control over my body by slapping my cheeks with the palms of her hand." This kind of coverage generated huge public interest in this case. 1,500 people packed the courtroom every day of the trial, while up to 2,000 people mobbed the streets outside. Hawkers sold fake tickets for $50, and souvenir vendors sold stick pins featuring a murder weapon, the sash weight, for 10 cents. Celebrities also flooded the courtroom to get their own front row seats. The courtroom was packed. The press was relentless. The New York Times said love letters read as murder trial opens. The prosecution dismantles Ruth's defense piece by piece. Prosecutor: "Mrs. Snyder, how many insurance policies did you take out on your husband?" Ruth: "I don't remember exactly." Prosecutor: "Enough to total over $90,000? Ruth: "I suppose." Prosecutor: "And did you attempt to kill him before?" And the courtroom becomes silent. The prosecutor pushes. "Answer the question." Ruth says, "I don't know what you mean." The jury deliberates 98 minutes. The verdict was guilty. The sentence was death by electric chair. They convicted both Ruth and Judd. Now we're going to head into the last days. We're in Sing Sing prison, January 1928. They wait separately. Judd prays. Ruth remains composed. Their final meal was very humble: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, celery, stuffed olives, and ice cream. Ordinary food for an extraordinary end. And you can't talk about this case without mentioning the infamous photograph. There were no cameras allowed in the room in Sing Sing Correctional Facility where Ruth's execution took place. But a photographer named Tom Howard snuck one in on his ankle. At the moment of her electrocution, the photographer lifted his pant leg and pressed a shutter release in his jacket, capturing a blurry picture of the body shaking from electricity. The next day, the Daily News ran a photo of Ruth Snyder, bound, masked, and dying. They ran it on the front page under the headline, "Dead." It sold out in 15 minutes. The black and white image was shocking to the U.S. and international public alike. There sat a 32-year-old wife and mother, killed for killing. Her blurred figure seemed to evoke her struggle, as one can imagine her last strained breaths. Never before had the press been able to attain such a startling image. Tom Howard received a $100 bonus for taking the photo. For decades, anyone attending an execution had to lift their pant legs for camera checks. To this day, photographers are still not allowed into executions. Many newspapers and online news sources still publish the frame before and after, but rarely do we ever see the moment of death. Ruth Snyder's last words, borrowed from the crucifixion, were, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." Ruth wanted freedom. Judd Gray wanted meaning. What they left behind was death, spectacle, and a photograph the world was never meant to see. My sources were History.com, The Double Indemnity, Murder That Gripped America, the Smithsonian Magazine, How a Tabloid Captured the First Execution Photo, Murderpedia, Ruth Snyder and Henry Judd Gray, the New York Daily News, 1927 to 1928, the New York Times Trial Coverage, 1927, and the New York State Court of Appeals summaries. Now, this was crazy. Literally, celebrities were flying in to try to get their spot in the courtroom, which only created more of a media circus. But the fact that they published this photograph of her dying was really a big moment in media history. Because like I said, people had been taking death photographs for years. The Victorian era is famous for it. People take photos of before someone dies and after, but never during. So this really stood out among what was going on. In the late 20s, people were hungry for it. Remember, this was a time of yellow journalism. And what that means is that they would make up stories just to get people to pay attention to the news. And the newspapers were feuding all the time. Who could have the better headlines? Who could have more information? And again, if they didn't know the information, they would literally just make it up. And they were doing that to sell more papers. That headline, "Dead," with that photograph, sold out in 15 minutes. You know, it makes you wonder about the humans as we are, that we crave to know about death, life and death. I mean, the whole reason why I'm curious about this particular podcast and true crime is because I am fascinated by the way humans work, how we figure things out, how we solve these things using science and deduction. I find all of that fascinating. What drives people to do this? what drives the investigators to solve these murders. I find it all so interesting. And that's the reason why I wanted to do this podcast and why I wanted to do it with Autumn, because she has the same passions that I do. I will say, that being said, I'd like to do cases that are from a long time ago because it doesn't feel current. And there's something about that that I find a little more comforting. Like I said, we have seen two people killed on television or on your phone or on some form of media in the last month. That's not normal. That's why this case stood out so much to me, because we are not supposed to see the moment of death. We're not supposed to see that. That is a private moment and it shouldn't be taken by anyone. So that was me on my soapbox. And I hope that in some way you found some comfort in this podcast. Hug your friends, hug your people, resist. We are seeing that protest matters. You matter. So go out, and I hope you have a good day. And I hope that you find a form of hope, because we all need that right now. And we will be back next week. Autumn will be with me recording, so it won't just be me by my lonesome on my soapbox. And again, thank you so much for listening to us. You can find us on Instagram at Murder Not Murdering. We are also on TikTok for now. We'll see how that works out. We're on TikTok for now at mnm.pod. Do check out our reels and our photographs on there. You're going to see things that you can put a face to the names. Also, if you do have any cases that you think that you would like us to cover, or someone that you have a personal connection to, please slide into our DMs on Instagram and we will get back to you right away, and we will do our best to cover your case the best that we can. So that's the end of this week's podcast. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back again next week. New episodes are always out on Mondays. And take care. Bye.